She was born into freedom, yet her life would be shaped by a crown that never truly belonged to her. In the middle of the 19th century, Europe was a continent ruled by empires that prized order above all else. Dominated by the powerful Habsburg Empire, ruled by Emperor Franz Joseph I, the continent was steeped in ceremony, tradition, and an endless web of rules that governed not only politics, but people themselves. Power lived behind palace walls, and kings and emperors did more than control land. They shaped lives, expectations, and futures. The upheaval of the 1848 revolutions had recently shaken these empires, a series of political upheavals that challenged established monarchies and called for greater freedom and democracy. Duty mattered more than happiness, obedience more than individuality. In such a world, status defined worth, and only a select few were allowed the luxury of becoming who they truly were. Yet, even amid this oppressive order, there lurked the looming shadow of conflict, a silent breath longing to escape the confines of marble facades and pretenses, hinting at the silent price demanded by the empire's heavy hand. Elizabeth was born in 1837 in Bavaria, far from the rigid centres of imperial authority. Her childhood unfolded in a landscape of movement and light rather than marble and shadow. Lakes shimmered beneath open skies, mountains framed the horizon, and days were shaped by freedom rather than ritual. She rode horses for hours, wandered through forests, and lived in tune with nature's rhythms. Laughter was encouraged, independence quietly nurtured. Her family allowed her to grow without the constant weight of expectation that pressed upon so many royal children. No one prepared her to command an empire. No one trained her to submit to one. She was raised simply to feel alive. Even so, the pull of duty could not be kept at bay forever. One afternoon, a carefree ride was interrupted by an urgent call from her father, reminding her of a formal dinner she was expected to attend with visiting nobles. The interruption itself was brief, but something shifted in that moment. The open landscape suddenly felt less secure, as though responsibility had quietly stepped into view. It was a small reminder, but it carried a warning about the life that awaited. That freedom ended when she was still a child by modern standards. At 16, Elizabeth married Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria and was carried into a world utterly unlike the one she had known. As she stepped into Vienna, the heart of a vast empire, the air felt heavy with the scent of polished wood and lingering incense. Her senses were overwhelmed, yet she noticed the solemn faces and the echo of their footsteps on marble floors. A tremor ran through her voice as she greeted each new face, each gesture laden with expectations. Vienna was a city built on discipline and display. Austria was a multi-ethnic empire, home to an array of peoples including Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Italians, and many others. The diversity of cultures, languages, and traditions made governance through control and ceremony essential. The court believed that imposing strict order was necessary to hold this immense and varied realm together. Appearances were everything. Personal choice mattered very little. Every gesture carried meaning. Every silence was deliberate. The young empress arrived uncertain and unprepared, stepping into a life that felt cold and watchful. Palace corridors stretched endlessly, echoing with footsteps that never truly belonged to her. Each movement was observed, each mistake remembered. Lessons replaced laughter, and silence replaced ease. During early instruction, tutors corrected her posture with careful authority, adjusting shoulders and stance as though shaping an object rather than guiding a person. These moments were not dramatic but constant, leaving her feeling controlled in ways she could not yet name. From the beginning, her body became a matter of public interest. Praise followed her everywhere, focused not on thought or insight, but on beauty and image. Her long hair, her slender figure, and her youthful face were celebrated and displayed. Portraits were painted and sent across the empire, fixing her image in the public imagination. Yet admiration carried its own burden. Mornings were consumed by rituals before the mirror, attendants working for hours to maintain an ideal that was never her own. Meals were measured with care. Every change in appearance was noted. Beauty, once a source of joy, became a form of confinement, and silence became a skill learned for survival. The empire wanted an empress who would obey without resistance. Elizabeth wanted something far simpler and far more difficult: space to breathe. As the years passed, her role hardened into symbolism. Ceremonies demanded elegance and restraint. Jewels and gowns turned her into a living emblem of stability. Yet behind the grandeur, isolation deepened. The first ceremony was an elaborate presentation of foreign dignitaries. The grand hall was filled with the echo of footsteps on polished marble, and the warmth of spectators was absent, replaced only with cold stares and calculated nods. Elizabeth stood as the pride of the empire, yet felt like a stranger in her own attire, her voice lost among the speeches that pinned her existence to the crown. Months later, during a royal banquet held to cement an alliance, the clinking glasses and murmured conversations offered no solace. Elizabeth found herself seated at the center, her ornate presence lacking purpose. The music was lively, yet did not invite dance. Her movements were restricted to the ceremonial nods and silent smiles expected of her. Finally, in the hushed solemnity of a state funeral, Elizabeth was cast deeper into solitude. The weight of mourning gowns and the oppressive atmosphere pressed upon her shoulders. Rituals prescribed every motion, every tear. Her individuality seemed swallowed by layers of decorum, and the silence within the crowd resonated more than any presence. Court life allowed little warmth and even less understanding. Rules multiplied, expectations tightened, and the walls of the palace seemed to close in with each passing season. Beyond Vienna, the world was changing. Across Europe, old systems of power were being questioned. Revolutions rose and fell, leaving unrest and uncertainty in their wake. The revolutions of 1848 swept across Europe as a series of political upheavals against the old conservative order. In Austria, the revolutionaries demanded greater participation in government and greater autonomy for the empire's various ethnic groups. The Habsburg monarchy faced a significant threat, leading Emperor Franz Joseph to concede to some of the demands, thereby temporarily quenching the revolutionary spirit. The memory of 1848 lingered as proof that even the strongest empires could tremble. Newspapers carried stories of protest and reform, sparking whispers of freedom and identity that crossed borders. One morning, an article headline caught Elizabeth's eye. "Another revolution in Berlin. The people demand change." The words resonated, mirroring her own yearning for transformation and personal liberty. As tensions rose, Austria struggled to maintain control over its many lands, relying on tradition and force to preserve unity. Elizabeth felt this tension keenly. Rather than retreating into court life, she looked outward. Languages were learned, cultures studied, and people observed with genuine curiosity. Listening came more naturally than commanding. Hungary, in particular, drew her attention and affection. Long ruled by Austria and often treated harshly, it responded to respect where force had failed. Where others demanded loyalty, she offered understanding. Where distance had defined a rule, she chose connection. This influence was quiet, but it was real. Through her presence and support, trust slowly grew. Elizabeth's influence was subtle but influential, as she fostered relationships with key Hungarian leaders and demonstrated a willingness to understand their cultural aspirations. By engaging in personal diplomacy and expressing genuine respect for Hungary's unique identity, she served as a sympathetic bridge between the often rigid Austrian court and the frustrations of the Hungarian people. Political pressure eased, and in 1867 a compromise reshaped the empire, creating Austria-Hungary and granting Hungary greater autonomy. When Elizabeth was crowned Queen of Hungary, she experienced something rare in her life, a sense of purpose that felt earned rather than imposed. It was not the thrill of power, but the meaning of belonging. Not control, but connection. In Hungary, admiration felt human rather than ceremonial, and for a time she felt seen. Yet public meaning did not protect her private world from sorrow. Court rules had already removed her children from her daily care, dictating how they would be raised and when she could see them. The loss of her first daughter introduced grief early, settling quietly into her life. Years later, the death of her only son, Rudolf, shattered what remained. His death shocked Europe and destabilized the future of the empire. For Elizabeth, it broke something that could not be repaired. Silence became refuge. Distance became survival. After this loss, withdrawal followed almost instinctively. Vienna was avoided whenever possible. Travel became constant, carrying her across coastlines battered by storms, through unfamiliar cities, and into mountain landscapes far removed from court life. Movement mirrored inner unrest, a restless pursuit of a freedom she could not grasp. Each journey was propelled by an unfulfilled yearning, a silent wish for self-forgiveness, an escape from the confines of identity and the echoes of unending duty. Stillness invited memory, and memory brought pain. Long walks filled each day, and horseback rides continued until exhaustion forced an end. Strict routines offered a sense of control that the palace had taken from her long ago. Black clothing replaced color. Fans and veils shielded her from view. The world continued to admire a beauty that no longer held meaning. Fame offered no comfort. The status provided no shelter. The crown brought neither peace nor protection. What once defined her now felt hollow. Gradually, a mystery gathered around her life. Sightings became rare. Stories spread. A queen without a home. An empress who refused to perform the role expected of her. Whispers followed her movements, and even history struggled to place her neatly within familiar narratives. Neither ruler nor rebel, she existed somewhere in between, resisting quietly by refusing to disappear entirely. In 1898, a journey to Geneva offered the promise of anonymity, No guards, no ceremony, just quiet movement beside the water. In a single, sudden moment, that fragile peace was destroyed. On September 10th, while walking along the promenade, Elizabeth was attacked by an Italian anarchist named Luigi Lucchini. Driven by a deep resentment toward the aristocratic order she represented, Lucchini believed that assassinating a royal would demonstrate his revolutionary ideals. He stabbed Elizabeth with a sharpened file, and though the wound seemed minor at first, it proved fatal. The act was swift. The silence that followed was immense. The empire mourned. Europe paused. Elizabeth of Austria lived at the center of power, yet spent her life searching for freedom. Admired and controlled, celebrated and unseen, surrounded by people yet profoundly alone. She shaped history not through command, but through endurance. Change followed not because she demanded it, but because she remained human within a system that sought to erase individuality. Her story is not one of triumph or tragedy alone. It is a story of longing, of quiet resistance, of a woman trying to remain herself in a world determined to define her. She was called Sisi. She was an empress, and she never stopped trying to breathe.